everyone, welcome to Taqueando. I'm your host, Bill Esparza, and this week we're heading back to Portland to talk to a friend of the podcast. He's never been on, but he's still a friend of the podcast. Chef Angel Medina, who is co owner of the Republica Hospitality over there in Portland, has multiple restaurants, including Republica, one that I've enjoyed several times, Lilia Comedor, Comala, and restaurants that I think are such a vital part of this new Mexican scene, not new Mexico, but new Mexican scene in Portland that's happened since the pandemic. But first, at Taqueando, eating antojitos is a way of life. From the world's most celebrated dining rooms to the gritty stands and storied market stalls that preserve culture. Life is short, so we must eat well. And here are this week's Antojitos Rundown. The first thing I want to share is a recent visit I had to Oceanside with Visit Oceanside for their Swell Plate series, which are food tours that highlight the wonderful, restaurants that are happening right now in Oceanside. Oceanside did not used to be a destination for restaurants. It was a, a rough, I didn't even know this, but it was kind of a rough, unruly area that the local Marines were, you know, just running all over the place, creating havoc. But now it's got nice restaurants, and it's a great place to visit. It's accessible by metro. You can take the Pacific Surfliner down there, and so you can find these food tours on the visitoceanside.org website for the Swell Plates series. Food tours run about $89.04, and you can grab one of North Oceanside, South Oceanside, Vista, and there's also a beer crawl. But some of the great bites that I had included a sheep's head tartare at Matsu, a wonderful restaurant there. That's a destination restaurant, but you can sample it through the food tour. You can also get the jambon beurre and Grüne Wettliner at Merenda Wine Bar, so sandwich and wine pairing. The braised lamb at Piper is a wonderful dish. Of one of my favorite restaurants in Southern California, definitely one of the best modern Mexican restaurants in the United States. Valle, go there for the queso taco and tuna tostada, which is on that food tour. And surprising bite of the food tour that I went on was the banana peel torta at the Plot. And so they're a vegan restaurant, and they I never thought I'd enjoy and say and promote banana peel, but excellent. So I recommend it. Again, that's Visit Oceanside Swell Plate series. The other bite I want to share with you this week was Tun La Majo, a restaurant I like to go to in the very Armenian centric areas of Burbank and Glendale. This one's in Burbank. And, of course, the La Majo and the bread is amazing. And I did have that. But I've been trying to get over this cold. So I thought I'd order the beef kashlama, which is a beef stew. And oh my God, the flavors in this thing. So it's a tomato based stew with beef and sweet peppers in there and other vegetables. And of course, I had it with their incredible flatbread that they make there in house. And I have to tell you, this restaurant doesn't miss. Everything is great. So, Tun La Majo, which is getting a lot of press, it's a 101 best restaurant on the LA Times list. That's all for this week. And without further ado, vamos a taquear. Welcome, chef.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me and letting me uh, just be able to share some of our stories and some more about what makes Portland such a great town despite all the madness you're seeing out there. Thank you.
Yeah. So, in addition to both of us, we both have a cold today. So if you're
We
watching
don't
the
sound this
reel,
nasally all the time.
yeah, I don't sound this nasal all the time either. So this is the most nasal podcast I hope to ever have. We're both of us have it. And I got a red eye right now too, so it kind of makes me look extra evil today. So for the haters, point that out, please. Um, but you and I got to know each other in in
Mhm.
2023. I had come through to do a taco event and the Tacos Tequila
Mm.
and Taps event, and I started really checking out the Portland scene. And I had not known much about Portland Mexican cuisine, except for, you know, some of the stories that I was hearing. And now, when I thought
Mm.
of Portland Mexican food, I was, my memory goes back to the 2017 incident where these two white ladies went to Puerto Nuevo and they were
Burrito
hooking
Gate.
Burrito
Yeah.
Gate, right? You were you living
Yes,
in were you living in Portland at the time?
I was. You know, it's funny. I knew those two young women, and this got me a lot of shit at the time because I wasn't in I was in in the restaurant industry yet. I was working for Airbnb, I think, and I remember just hearing the hype and reading about it, and just being like, "This can't be real." And I showed up, and you could say a lot of things about these young women who were appropriating, who were dumb for thinking that they were tongue in cheek or that they were
Yeah,
saying something cool and hip for their audience. But it came at a time where it was tough. They opened up the conversation where people started talking about who was doing what at the time, not intentionally. But at the end of the day, I tried the tortilla, and you know, I gotta say, it was one of the best tortillas I've ever had, flour tortillas I've ever had. And I was so conflicted. 'Cause I'm like, I hate this so much, but it
right.
it, it actually was good. I won't, and maybe it's my
Wait a
my
minute, they're still
non-industry
around?
brain, but
Those women are still around?
no, 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 no. The thing was, is like they were never part of the industry. They were doing a pop up. They're like these kids that have
Right.
great jobs, and I think one of them was like working in like human resources at Adidas. I'm not gonna put them on blast now, but they didn't have bad intent. They just had bad. They got too cute with the way that they talked about the cuisine and how they peeked through people's windows, which that was a big one because nobody would teach them how to make these tortillas. So it was. I mean, this thing was talked about everywhere, and I'm happy that you have that memory of it. I think that's what put Portland Mexican cuisine sadly on the map, not in a
Right.
good way in that way.
And it was, you're right. It did more than the burritos and the tortillas. And really, you and I know that there are a lot of white chefs that have come to Mexico
Mhm.
and they look over people's shoulders. They videotape them. They say, "Hey, we're just recording your process." They don't tell them, "Hey, we're going to go use
Right,
this info and write a book, or we're going to write a cookbook with this info, or we're going to open a
right,
restaurant based on this concept," which is very different from what they're telling the people. So they're like, "Okay, we trust these people. They're and then
right.
you and I show up and we have to be like, hey, by the way, we actually really
But
aren't going to do that. When I'm interviewing people or going to write about them, I have to always like make sure that, hey, I'm taking photos, but I'm not using this for my monetary gain other than the fact I'll be writing about you.
right,
And in my
but
profession,
it does say a lot about the culture.
it does say a lot about the
You know,
culture.
it says a lot about both of our cultures. The fact that like our people, and I'm not Moses, so when I say our people, I mean like mostly in Latin American
Yeah,
conversations, we give access to foreigners as a thing of pride. We think, please come to my house, come to my
sure.
kitchen, let me show you how to do this. This is not. We don't think like these people are going to monetize off of this, make a whole living, write books, and not even hire people that look like me. Right? They're going to talk about it as they invent it. They're going to give access to people in ways that doesn't really. They're never going to take me into consideration. They're not going to take into consideration this moment where they came here to my humble little home where I fed them beans, when I fed them tortillas, where I showed them how to do this thing. And that says so much about who we are and so much about what a lot of those chefs are. And that I think is always a part that for you and I has been troubling.
Right. And so, given that story. And then, of course, at the time, one of the biggest and loudest Mexican restaurants in Portland was also
Yeah.
owned by a white guy, um, and
Yes.
doing taco de guisado, who was,
Hmm.
always who was openly appropriating, and then I guess
Hmm.
2020 happened and the pandemic, and that guy closed and compared himself to George Floyd, a white guy losing his taqueria, his Mexican taqueria, compared
Right.
himself to George Floyd. So, like, all the craziness in Portland, I had in my mind. So when I did this event, I had to do like a lot of research, and when I came in, I started going to the restaurants. I'm like, wait a minute, like, how did this change to where Now, before I ask you the question here, or before I let you address this, I
Mhm.
want to just say that, again, I had the most wonderful tasting meal, and I guess you're not doing that anymore at Republica. You've shifted from that.
No, we still are. It's
Okay,
it's a condensed version. It's 7 courses,
right.
and I'll explain a little bit why. But we wanted to do both a la carte, and we wanted to do the tasting, mostly because it's what the times called for at the moment. But I'll tell you more about this as we move along with the conversation.
But so I had that experience twice, and I also had wonderful meals at Tierra del Sol, which is at the Mercado, La Mixteca,
Mm,
and Mis Tacones, Chelo, Chilango, which has a wonderful vegan Mexican concept. Güero, El Jefe. I don't know
right.
if you heard of this place that does birria, and Taqueria Los Puñales, which is such a fun place and also like a restaurant with with a wonderful attitude that I love. Uh, Principe Maya is, so like
Hmm.
all these great restaurants, and I thought to myself, I want to, ask you, how did we get to, the white ladies trying to do Puerto Nuevo style burritos to this wonderful
Hmm.
boom that happened, you know?
Yeah, I think a lot of it was just it was a collection, right? Like readiness didn't arrive all at once. It showed up in small risks people were suddenly willing to take. There was Mexican food, but there wasn't yet a shared language for talking about it with seriousness. And I think that was the big opportunity that we took. That we saw, um, you know, everybody was sort of trying to do something based out of nostalgia. And a lot of the times, when you don't have the resources or even the language to pull outside of the nostalgia, you end up with just one big concentrated thing of the things that are available to you and you make them. So, this is a reason why Mexican cuisine for such a long time looked the same and shared the same thing. Somehow, shredded lettuce showed up in a plate, and nobody can explain why. Maybe you can, Bill, but these were the things that sort of built this cuisine.
Or how in Portland kale showed up on the plate.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But see, that's the beauty of it is that like
Right.
I think for us, we did a couple of things, right? Like with Republica, we knew that we knew what the cuisine looked like outside of the nostalgia. We wanted, and when I say nostalgia, is that people have different versions of what Mexican cuisine is when they come to this country. A lot of folks don't have the privilege that you and I have had to be able to travel throughout all of Mexico. They go from
Right.
their small town in Michoacan or the small town in Guanajuato. They come here, and then when you serve them menudo, they're like, "¿Qué es esta chingadera?" They're like, "I don't. This menudo is not supposed to have this." And you're
Right.
like,
And you lived in Guadalajara. You also what ages did you live in Guadalajara?
I grew up in Guadalajara from the ages 4 to 8. I grew up in Tijuana from 8 to 13. I came back to the States. I lived in Southern California up until 2010 when I moved to Portland. And then in 2019, before the pandemic, I moved to Mexico City. And a lot of that was to write a series about coffee and shoot a series about coffee. And I had opened coffee shops at that point.
Right.
So I was fortunate enough to make it a point. When you live in Mexico City, you're very central to just take a bus and you could go to Puebla, you could go to Hidalgo, you could explore the Otomi region, you could explore cuisines that take a plane and end up in Yucatan and end up in the
Yeah, the
Maya
perimeter is
region.
rich
There's so
in
much,
the best cuisines, right?
and they're all very different. I mean, you one of the best. I think the one of the few conversations I've had the privilege of having with you talking about food from Guerrero because it's such a special thing that looks nothing like what people imagine Mexican cuisine to be,
Yeah.
and it's the same thing when you talk about like Hidalgo. Hidalgo's food, you're like caldo de qué? Caldo de rata? Is this right? Caldo de víbora? Like that. None of this makes any sense. But when you talk about like the la recoleta and how different that is, and like the way that people cultivate the milpa in other towns, it's day and night. So we are given all these things, and for that, I wanted to make sure that I understood the etymology of everything before I actually opened something that looked like something that already existed here.
Yeah, and for the people who haven't been to Republica, I just want to add that what you're doing there and you've been doing there with the tasting menus reflects more, not exactly, but reflects more of what's happening in modern Mexican cuisine in Mexico than, like, for instance, the Alta California cuisine here in Los Angeles or in other parts of the US.
Mhm.
And which is not saying any anything bad about any of the approaches, but I did see that you're coming from more of a perspective of like I'm more aligned with something I'm seeing over there rather than you know a
Right.
local Portland perspective, for instance.
Yeah, everything. I didn't. Our food just needed a room to share the story out in the open to, right? Like I knew that when we did this tasting menu, that whether it was 7 or 7 courses, each course was going to take you through the etymology of a dish. Our chefs, our young chefs, as they develop things, or even our culinary director or chef de cuisine, or whoever it might be, they always have to understand where this came from. You're going to make enchiladas suizas. You can't just throw them on a plate and say, look how fancy they look because I did this to it. I need to know the entire history, because when you learn the history of a dish, you learn to respect it. When we open the tasting menu at Republica, like the first course is it's what we call botanas. It's a totopo, it's a little tlacoyo, and it's a memela, right? Uh, and these things are made with just the components that existed in the Americas prior to the arrival of Spaniards. Now, for us, if you told me that, or if you told me that, I'd be blown away by how much flavor exists between the corn and the native chilies that exist there and the beans without having to add anything else that didn't belong here. But for some people, they're like, that's kind of basic. It's like, well, it's not basic. This is just what people ate prior to 1519.
Yeah,
As you go through the menu, you keep learning more and more of the history. And for us, that was at the point of Republica. But for a lot of people, they're like, uh, this is incredible. This is like nothing else I've seen. And then once in a while, you get the people that are just confused by it because they think they're getting a lecture on, wokeness, as they want to say.
which is very Portland.
Very Portland.
Yeah, I mean,
On brand.
yeah, and so the approach you've taken with those restaurants with Republica, Lilia, Comedor, and Comala is wonderful, and but another thing that you've done besides make a really unique restaurant, that you can, I feel like you can kind of do what you're doing in Portland. You don't have this as strong of an audience like Los Angeles audience is fierce when it comes to things, right or wrong, about Mexican
Of
food.
course. Yes.
And so, like, even Mexican chefs have failed here. Big name Mexican chefs have failed here. Enrique Alvera, it really took them 3 years to kind of get like, okay, we are now like attracting not only the locals, but we're getting the critics are coming in. They're being appreciated more because they've taken that time to get over that learning curve of LA. But like what you're doing in Portland is amazing, and I think more important is what you've done to nurture and develop young chefs. I got the pleasure of having a meal cooked for me by Chef Dani Morales, um,
Hmm.
and I know you have another chef, Juan Gomez, and then there was another one
Hmm.
with you, Lalo Camarena. But like all these young chefs, they're developing great skills. I mean, they're getting a
Yeah.
wonderful experience working in your kitchen, and I feel like they are going to be the future of what we see in Portland.
I agree. I think, I always like to believe that talent doesn't need rescuing, it needs access, right? And if I could be credited with anything along with my partner here, is that we've sacrificed a lot of our own time, our life, our money, attention, mental health, whatever you want to call it, because we felt that we needed to create room for them. And not just them, but the people under them. What people fail to realize sometimes is that when you develop something, but somebody at the top, a lot of that, it travels down. Like what the work that Chef Danny, that it's taken us to like sort of mold her into taking her from somebody that was working at her bakery that we saw was hyper talented. When we got her to focus, that was passionate, and that passion came through the food. It wasn't easy. It was the same with Chef One. We saw one of the most talented, in my opinion, the most talented chef in this city with what he's given with Lilia, which is creating a new menu every week, fully based off of seasonality. It's just something that doesn't exist in the country, right? To execute at that level and actually be excellent, again, there's only so much that we can do to take credit for it. This is just giving them the room to think big and dream big, and being able to know that even if it's not quite recognized right now, the
Yeah,
effect of the things that we built, not just in those three chefs, but there's like 5 pop-ups out there that are doing well, that are some version of what they learn at Republica. I see it in the dishes, and they're doing well. I take pride in that, even though it's become direct competition, or even though they found a way to take the things that they wanted and then add their own thing. It's still showing you that this was necessary. And when I look at a timeline, when I look at a map at the end of the day, whether it's now or whether I look at it 5 years from now, I'm going to see the effect. I'd be like, that kid's from Republica, that one from Lilia, that one came from De Noche, the other from Comala. And that's what we feed off of in the long run, because ultimately our goal was always to really show off that within our people we had the talent to do this. And I can go on and talking about this, because you really don't see this many chefs coming out of one place from anybody in this town. And this is how we've been able to be the one of the most influential restaurants in the history of Portland. Right now, the food, yes, but it's the fact that you continue to develop not just here, the cafes, the coffee shops, the way that you speak about it, the way that you're so on top of seasonality. It's kind of amazing to watch. And yeah, I'm proud of it. When I get excited about it when I talk about it.
Yeah, no, and you should be. And that is so important. I mean, in LA, we have Damian here, we have Chef Enrique Olvera's team here. So we're seeing that happen here as well. We have Hol Bosch, people are coming out of those restaurants. It's important to have a center where the next generation of our chefs coming from Latino culture, Mexicans, Central Americans, can develop skills and also the confidence to cook
Right.
cuisine from their culture. Now, this
Hmm.
happened very quick, right? Between the pandemic, when we saw the shift to um,
2020. Yep.
Mexican restaurants owned by Mexicans serving a variety of Mexican food in Portland for the first time, from an outsider's point of view, to
Hmm.
the raids, the ICE raids, the kidnappings, the chaos
Mm.
that has descended on
Yeah.
Los Angeles, Portland, right now Minneapolis, we're seeing it. We're seeing it in New York, all over the country. But, you know, for you, I would say that you guys being so close to Canada, I want to
Hmm.
know which Trump policies have really
Oh, geez.
affected your business.
Yeah, I think that the big one here isn't so much a policy; it's the idea. I will tell you, every year as a group, we grew about between 12 to 15%, depending on the year. This year, going into 2025, I should say not this year, last year, going into 2025, knowing that the election had already been won by the current administration, I started making changes. My partner and I started saying, okay, how do we cut costs by farming our own product, by
Right.
cutting a middleman in here, by adjusting the menu in ways that it's going to be, it's going to protect us from like a quick swing. And man, when that swing hit, it hit. Well, you're trying to create predictability. You're trying to create something that's stable. That you're like, okay, if this changes, that means the cost of this thing is going to change, but it's going to change 3 or 4%. We lost 34% of our guests overnight. This is Canadians made up that much, and overnight they disappear. And for me, this was a perfect example that I took to travel Portland, to travel Oregon, to prosper Portland, to anybody that was willing to listen and the administration locally here, and said, this is a canary in the coal mine. You guys have to pay attention to the fact that nobody knows these numbers better than we do. And I can tell you that we've never had, because immediately you're like, what just happened? Like, did our menu change? Did something all of a sudden, did we piss off somebody? It's not like the reviews are coming out bad. It's just people overnight stopped coming. And it wasn't until at the end of the summer of 2025 that the local tourism board, Travel Portland, said, oops, turns out over 530,000 folks that come into Portland are from Canada. And this year they decided not to come. Now, when you think about that number, what effect it had, it meant that everybody else had to survive. So hotels might look like they're doing the same, but that's because they brought their costs down, from whatever they were charging before to like $100 to $110 per
Right.
night. The same thing happened to us. When we seen that effect, we're like, okay, how did we lose so much? We cannot continue this. We have to cut one of our restaurants. We need to make it into We need to make it so that we have the tasting menu, but it's instead of 10 courses, it's seven, so people can afford it. We need to put an a la carte course to get a la carte menu together, and then figure out how to open up Republica to more than just this culinary experience that people can drop in at any point. Now you make those changes, and the reservations do change, but what changes with it is the cost average per cover, which means that you might have more people, but you drastically change the pricing of everything.
Right.
And the way that this policy has an effect on that, the things that you're seeing from Minneapolis and from other places that have a food scene is that and it's going to continue. The menus are going to get tighter, right? The schedules are going to get shorter. You're not going to have 7 days. You're going to have five, maybe four, if you can open. And we're seeing that already because people are staying home. Not necessarily here yet, but we do get those calls where people are living with this paranoia of like, I don't know who's out there. Can you pick me up? Or I don't know if I can make it. Can you call an Uber? They don't even want to drive their cars here anymore. And the thing is that Portland is not even at the point where Minneapolis is. Seeing what's
Right.
happening in Minneapolis right now, beyond the murder, is going to be the first example of like this is how you kill hospitality.
Yeah, and he is threatening to come back to Portland and Los Angeles with the
Mhm.
same kind of force that they're showing in Minneapolis. And I mean, your restaurants, you're dealing with tariffs, you're dealing with inflation, you're
Mhm.
dealing with ICE raids that scare our community into going to work, going to eat, and creating that moving those dollars through the economy. A lot of people don't understand that, working class people eating, they're helping a restaurant that's going to be able to go, a restaurant owner that's going to be able to go to your place. And there's this trickle up effect that happens through the working class economy of our people, of Latinos, of Mexicans, of immigrants, indigenous people. And so that's so important and vital because we're spending money, but you're also now dealing with the lack of Canadian tourism. It's overwhelming,
Mhm.
And I saw this quote the other day from a political commentator on Twitter, and I'm calling it Twitter forever too, just like a lot of people, and that said if Donald Trump were trying to ruin America, would you be able to tell the difference? And I'm like, I
Wow.
don't think I
Yeah,
don't
that
think
is
I I
that is
don't think I'd be
powerful.
able to know. Like, why would you, even if you had these horrible policies, even if you wanted to do things like this, why would you openly discourage tourism from all over the world? Why would you discourage people from wanting to come here and spend money? Why would you discourage
I,
people from going to
I
work?
don't, I don't understand it.
Why would you rip
But
the
there,
farm workers off the farm? It doesn't make
yeah,
any sense, you know?
there's so many signals though. Like
Yeah.
the thing about restaurants is that we don't exaggerate risk. We experience it earlier than most industries, and we experience it as we see the rising cost of food items and everything else that comes with it, right? Like we see it, we're like, oh shit, something's happening where this is happening. And the thing about fear, when you're talking about it on the ground level with these guys showing up, is that fear doesn't make kitchens loud; it makes them quiet. And the problem with quiet kitchens is they stop growing. People are like, I'm not coming in for that. I'm not gonna, risk leaving my family so that I can go and like prep whatever you need me to prep. We've actually had people that decided like, look, this is it, man. Come March, come April, come May, whatever it is, I'm out of here. Restaurants are built on forecasting, and the thing is that when the variables won't hold still, the responsibility starts it starts to look like paralysis, where everybody's just frozen because they don't know what the next move should be because again, there's no predictability to it. So,
Yeah.
as far as like where Canadian tourism fits in, it's look when the borders feel tense, that's when I feel like the trust hesitates. And for us, we began seeing it and we began pointing it out. And I keep saying that shit over and over, but everybody should have been like, okay, stop right now. How do we change this? This should have been the first write up. We keep doing these things that are, I pass these carts around that I ordered, and I ordered them early on in February last year, which are the red carts of like your rights what to do if you're stopped. And I began passing them to different restaurateurs, different friends of mine, pass them to your staff. And at the end of the day, none of this stuff matters because they're finding a loophole to get around it because they don't care. This has nothing to do with the financial impact of it. It has to do with whether or not can we move our agenda so we can stay in power as long as we can.
Yeah.
And that's where like it gets really scary for us because there really isn't anything you could prepare for. So
Right. It's a multi-pronged approach of we're going to do these things, but then we're also going to, do things to interfere with elections and stifle the election so that they can again stay in power, and so it won't matter. Um, I saw,
right.
I saw what's Pam Bondi. They're very good at giving these rolling their eyes when Congress is saying, you're going to have to answer for this at some point. They're like, oh, whatever. It's like no one in their administration seems to care about anything that's in the Constitution, and it's absurd every day
Nothing.
having to remind people this is our right, this is a First Amendment right, this is a Fifth Amendment right, this is, we're having to literally fight to the death for the basic rights,
Yep.
what, and it very much, yeah, I mean, it's
I,
unbelievable.
that's it, man. Like hospitality, it's historically always ran on thin margins, trust, and tourism. And when any of those three at any point like wobble, the whole thing feels it. You just need one to suffer, and you'll feel it. And right now, we're feeling all three. So there
Yeah.
isn't really a lot to be energetic or hopeful about.
No, I mean, and again, it just doesn't make sense in a country where we've outsourced so many things, which is, that's a natural part of globalization. But the one thing that we do have that's
Mhm.
local and made here, all these people like America First, made in America. Well, hospitality is 100% made in America. You know, you go to a
Right.
restaurant, you're eating local produce, local uh, grown animals. You're you're paying for the rents of local uh, citizens that live in your area. So it's so local. It's such an American thing. It's something that we're bet. I
Right.
feel like we're better than, or as, I mean, what stupid the word better, but we're as good as any part of the world when it comes to great restaurants and a great restaurant scene. And that is what attracts people. People, it's on the damn travel sites, where to stay,
Hmm.
what to see, what to
Hmm.
eat. And like hospitality
Right.
is, that's what it is. And now,
You know, it's funny you mentioned that about the travel sites because I was doing some research as I was writing for my Substack earlier this morning. I went back to 1940s and looked at all the approved restaurants in France and Paris during Nazi occupation, and these are like this is like the Michelin guide for Nazi officers. And there was such a thing, right? There was restaurants that remained open because they didn't have a choice but to
right,
stay open. So you have some of the classics like the Ritz, that where officers were dining, staying, living the life while everybody else was starving, and then you have places that are known for like the art that existed there in the 20s, 30s, and they're staying open. And immediately after reading that, it gave me chills because I think I'm not doing that. I'm not doing it. I'm not. If it gets uglier than what it is right now in Portland, I don't even need to get to that point. But when we see ICE marching through the streets of Portland, and that happens, before that even happens, I'm calling it a day. I'm going to be sorry, guys. This is it for me. I am not going to put my people at risk so that we can stay open for anyone else. Not just because of that, but because of them coming in and getting snagged at any point. It's just not worth it. And I think that if more of that starts to come out, when you start seeing more of it, it'll make it okay for people to be like, fuck it. I don't want to do this if this is the cost of doing business. This is not what we signed up for. So
yeah, I mean, if only we could get a kind of leader out there that would call for a general strike. I mean, that would be something to do, I think, that we haven't seen. Minnesota has given me so
mhm.
much hope, the way they are fighting so vigorously against ICE, and rightfully so when they've had, a citizen murdered. But, and they're also acknowledging the fact that undocumented um, people have been murdered as well, which is the same.
Right.
Renee Good puts definitely a different kind of martyr on the face of this thing, but all these lives that have been lost, we have had so many people murdered. And so, to go back to what we started to talk about earlier, you are dealing with this right now, and you've made some
Right.
changes at Republica, which again,
Hmm.
it's hard to say this all the time. We're always saying, please go out and support these restaurants. It's so overwhelming for people. There's so many restaurants closing, so many restaurants struggling. It costs a lot of money for groceries and food right now. But what are you doing right now? But can you maybe go through what you're doing with the 7 course menu and what you're doing at the other restaurants right now to sort of make it affordable to people in Portland?
Yeah, I think, for us, Republic has always been a destination. I think once we started doing the tasting menu, known for that nationally, through the beer nomination, through the Bon Appetit 10 Best in the country, it really became that. And
Right,
we used to joke that we could open Republic in a basement and we were going to be fine. And for the most part, it felt that way. Even with the growth of other restaurants that we opened, Republica continued making its margins 12 to 15% gains across. And now with this, when we saw the effect that it had, we're like, okay, I'm not going to pivot. I'm not going to go from being known for this incredible food that takes so
right,
much intentionality to create, and simply go and make guisados. I love guisados, and to be honest, I would love to just do that at one point, but we can't make that hard pivot. And also the numbers behind it aren't just quite there. If I was guaranteed to have triple the audience coming in, then by all means, you make it. You make the restaurant, instead of a tasting menu at $150 per person, you make it the typical a la carte that's out there, that like
right.
everything's being made to be shared and so forth. I would have done that, but it cannot be with the work that we've done. So we took that. We said, okay, we need to make it into seven, less touches, less complexity. Just make it so that people once again feel connected and rooted into it. It doesn't have to look like what people imagine a Michelin restaurant would be. It has to be made so that there's a balance between the story we began telling in 2020 and the progress that we made up until 2025. Then, on top of that, you have to have an incredible a la carte menu that gives people the option to come back more often. And for the most part, that's worked, right? We've added things that are um, fun to just change every 3 months as opposed to every week as we have done in the past, right? So we did that with Republica. We moved Lilia to a different location closer to downtown, um, and we continue the same thing. Look, we're going to go for every this concept is very much hyper seasonal, which means that any week the reset starts on Tuesday when we open. It's going to be an entirely new menu from the week before, and it's going to be it's going to be made by using everything that's in season that week. So the
Right.
relationships become a lot stronger, and again, that has its flaws within itself, because as a consumer, you love something that week and you come back 3 weeks later and it's an entirely different thing. You can't come back and bring your friends back on the promise that, like, you got to try this thing. It's still going to be great, but it's not going to be the same thing that you remember. So when you create these restaurants that take so much work, it's almost like you open a restaurant, you make it cool, and then you move it 2 blocks down the street, and to confuse people. It has that effect on people where they're like,
Right.
this is the same, but it's very different. So it's got its challenges, and that's really what we wanted to create for a long time. That was predictable because we knew that we weren't trying to, be the we. I've never. I couldn't tell you what it's like to serve chips and guac or serve a margarita. We make margaritas on request, but we never had them on the menus.
Yeah.
We never made a burrito. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but this just wasn't the space for the food and the stories that we wanted to create. And believe me, man, like when I see the margins on burritos, when I see the margins on on what chips and guac, the effect that it have on Mexican cuisine, I'm just like, you idiot.
Yeah, it's hard to resist. It's also so popular, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It
People
works.
sometimes, we have people that have read about it. Yeah, they read about it. They're coming from the suburbs. They're going to go watch a show or a basketball game or something, and they stop in and they just want chips and guac and some margs. And you're like, I'm sorry, we have this whole other thing that is not that, but you're gonna love it anyway. And they end up loving it if they give it a chance, but it's not really the thing that people think about when they think of most ideal.
Right.
And when we created it, I was okay with that. And I'm still in my own egotistical, I don't care about profits. I kind of care about it, but it takes a beating on you for sure.
Well, right. Obviously, you care. There's a balance, though. There's a balance between, what kind of restaurant you're trying to make, and and how much money that can make. Um, you know, so
Yeah, it's growth though. I think that's a difference with LA, right? Is that in LA or anywhere else in the market, somebody, one of my elders would have pulled me aside and said, "I love what you're doing, but don't do that fully because when the market changes or this factor changes, you're not going to be able to sustain yourself." And they would have told me, "What are you paying yourself? Pay yourself." They would have told me, "Don't expand so fast." They would have done all the mentoring that I've been able to provide for people over the last 5 years that I did not get. Where some of the times when people are like, "Hey, I'm thinking of opening a restaurant," I'm like, "Don't do it." I'm thinking of opening a coffee shop. Don't do
yeah,
it unless you're willing to sacrifice all these things. Don't do it.
that's the beauty of being a self-taught restaurateur.
There you go.
So,
It hurts.
okay. Well, again, I you're doing so many amazing things, and I'm definitely rooting for all these spaces. Again, it's important not just as me as a diner that wants to visit the places, but I see I was again. I'm going to say this again and again. I'm really looking for big things from Chef Dani. Uh, just making wonderful food and really dedicated and very serious about her education and her progress. Um, so, besides what's coming out of your kitchen, and of course, we're still at a great time for modern Mexican American in the United States. Who are some other chefs that you kind of have your eye on right now across the country that are doing some amazing things?
There's a few people. I think out of the like just speaking about Minneapolis easily. Gustavo Romero for me is incredible. This is the chef um, at Oro Taqueria or Oro tortilleria. You could it's like 10 things, right? Like he started
Okay,
with
right.
with just the tortillas, and now he's built an empire on it. But the reason why it's so important, this is a man that comes from Hidalgo, his family, his heritage, his connection to corn. He's also related. He was a cousin of our first chef, Lauro Romero, our first chef and business partner when we started Republica. And I'm excited about him because it's not me just being excited. I mean, this is
Sure.
he's one of Bon Appetit's 25 best of 2024. He's got the beer nominations, and we actually, as I been building little by little Todos Media, my media platform. We shot this beautiful piece about called Humble Kitchen about his story and everything that he's overcome to be where he's at. And among those, Emmanuel Chavez in Houston. Uh, if you're familiar with his story as well, he's got the Michelin star down in his restaurant, and he's interpreting cuisine in a level that we were fortunate enough to see when he came and did a pop up at Republica. And I think I'm biased because whenever I travel, I always try to pay my respects, my homage and when I say homage, I mean like I just want to go there and say,
Sure.
I want to take pictures of your food and hope that I do it justice because what you're doing is so courageous and is so necessary to continue telling that story that Mexican cuisine it's no longer at surface level when we speak about it or when we promote it or when we talk about it. We don't have to hype it up anymore. It is what it is, and we've always
Yeah.
known this, and people are finally starting to recognize it. So, I always look for the Mexican joints when I look around.
Can you give me one
By the
more?
way, that was Nixta Oro for Gustavo Romero.
Right.
Uh, one more. I mean, this is going to be a challenge, but like one of my favorite people is here, and that is in Xiaoye. This is a young couple, second gen Chinese Americans, and I don't know if you're familiar with Xiaoye in Portland, but they do food from memory, from what they remember those late night
Yeah.
snacks or dinners that they had with their family, and it's a beautiful thing. we've been fortunate enough to have him here for 2 years and sort of watching him expand from where they started 2 years ago, where they were just trying to figure out what is this supposed to be, to like now where they've established a personality, not just to them as individuals because they always had it, but in the food as it's presented and as they speak about it, it's kind of amazing. So go to Xiao Ye if you're in Portland, and
Okay.
obviously come to Lily and Republica. So,
Noted. Those are all great
but
recommendations.
and for the record, there's some great food in Portland. I don't need to tell you guys. There's Acadi, Astera, L'Orange. I mean, even the old school ones like Maurice with Christine Murray. I mean, these are amazing places that we are just so lucky to have in this town. That when you see the collection of restaurants that exist here that open up every year, um, it's kind of amazing how much we have, and everything is just so close to each other, right? The per capita of like any of these could be a New York Times 50 best in my opinion. So again, biased because it's Portland.
Sure. No, the dining scene there is incredible. Um, so I'm coming to town, and we've never done this yet, but if I'm coming to town and you're gonna, you know me, and my experience, you see my travels. Where are you taking me? What are the three spots that we got to hit?
Oh, okay. This is gonna throw you off. I think we start with the simple things, getting it right. Um, easily, easily, and I know that it might not be the ideal. I mean, common sense would tell you go to Cafe Oli, have a nice brunch. That's too easy. We're gonna go to Fish and Rice. This is just a it's a poke bowl, but more than that, if that makes any sense. Fish and Rice is one of my favorite sushi joints, even though they don't really advertise themselves as that. There's a lot of whimsy that happens in there, and the hospitality there is like nothing else. The fish is near perfect. The guy, the owner, and the chefs, the way they speak about it, it makes you happy when you hear it. Second, if we're gonna go have dinner somewhere, this is going to be no surprise. I'm going to bring you to Lilia, or I'm going to bring you to Republica. That's an easy one. That's a given. And that part of that is just to continue that conversation, because we
Sure.
know that bringing you here gives not just our restaurants a platform, but some of these young chefs that are working in there an opportunity to be able to celebrate. It's not every day that Bill Sparsa comes into town. So those are my first two. And then third one, that's easy. Um, I think we go with something classic. Uh, we either go to Lovely's 50/50 because they're one of the few pizza joints. Well, I shouldn't say few. There's a lot of great pizza joints, but her pizza joint is based on seasonality. And I would say that the things that she offers that are non pizza related are just as good, if not better, because of how fresh and how intentional those selections are. Right. So I love Lovely's 50/50. I go there as much as I can. And the pizza is secondary to me, despite the fact that it's really good. We'll find more places. The thing about it, Bill, is that by the time you come here, whether it's next week, next month, or next year, there's going to be 10 more restaurants coming in. That's
That's
just how,
that's
or
great to
10
hear that
pop-ups
people are
coming in.
still
That's just how
opening.
fast this is happening.
That's wonderful to hear. Well,
Yeah, we
sh-
don't get us wrong. We're closing a lot, but there's always somebody that's eager, crazy, adventurous, or motivated to say, "Why not us?" You know.
yes. So for all of you that are going to Portland, again, check out Republica, Lilia Comedor, Comala. Um, also, people can also find your work on Todos Media. Sorry, people can also find your work on Todos Media. You've been working on some documentaries. Where can we see that? Where can we see your
Mhm.
work?
So the fastest way to go to it, you can find us on YouTube, on our YouTube channel,
Yeah,
Watch Todos. If I can suggest anything, because we shot 5 different shows last year. We spent the entire time, and we haven't released them until we'll be releasing them in May, all behind paid subscription on Substack. If you want to read about Portland, if you want to read about the state of things, how I feel about immigration, and the things that are beautiful about our town, about music, about travel, about culture, go to my Substack between courses, and tell me what you think of the writing, and then we'll send you some videos. It'll be a fair deal.
okay. Chef Angel, thank you for coming on, and I can't wait to see you again in Portland.
Likewise. And last thing, Chef, I cannot say how much work, how important what you're doing is. And I hope that people keep tuning in, people keep listening, because this conversation, it's obviously, it needs the attention that it deserves more than ever. And people need to understand this is not just a problem that's happening in Portland or in LA and Minneapolis, it's happening all over. And really, the survival of not just our culture, but of hospitality as a whole depends on what we do these next couple of months before the the midterm elections, and how loud or how much impact we can create with the voice that we have individually. So thank you for giving us a platform, and thank you for giving us a space to share these stories.
You're always welcome.
Thank you for tuning in to the Taqueando podcast this week. And be sure to tune in next week for another episode. And please leave us a rating or review wherever you listen to your podcasts.